An 18-year-old orphan stood in front of the convent doors, staring down a decision that would define the rest of her life. Behind her, a cold stone orphanage run by strict nuns, a place where dreams were traded for discipline. Ahead of her, nothing but uncertainty, hunger, and the harsh streets of early 1900s France. She turned around and walked away. No money, no family, no connections, just the clothes on her back and a burning desire to never be poor again. That orphan girl would become Coco Chanel, the woman who would shatter fashion norms, scandalize high society, and rise to become the queen of luxury. Her name would one day adorn perfumes, handbags, and a fashion empire worth over $30 billion. But how does someone go from abandoned child to the most famous global fashion icon of the 20th century? The answer lies not just in talent, but in a trail of lovers, lies, betrayal, and war. This is the untold story of Coco Chanel and the rise, fall, and rise again of a fashion empire. Chapter 1. The Lie She Told the World. Gabrielle Chanel was born into poverty on August 19, 1883. Her mother worked as a laundrywoman. Her father, a traveling peddler who vanished the moment her mother died. At just 12 years old, Gabrielle was dropped off at the convent of Aubergine, an orphanage run by nuns. She would never see her father again. The orphanage was cold, strict, and silent. The girls lived by a harsh routine. No laughter, no freedom, just discipline and prayer. But there was one thing the nuns did teach her that would change her life: sewing. With each stitch, Gabrielle learned patience, precision, and control, skills that would one day define her designs. But when Chanel later told her story to the press, she didn't mention the orphanage. She said she was raised by her aunts. It was her first rebranding, a complete rewrite of her past. Because to enter high society, an orphanage background didn't fit the narrative. She left Aubergine at 18 and enrolled in finishing school, learning etiquette and dressmaking. But Chanel didn't just want refinement. She wanted to escape poverty, erase shame, and walk among the people she used to envy from afar. And she already had a plan. She wouldn't marry rich. She'd do something far more dangerous. She'd become rich. But first, she needed to get close to the elite. And the way she chose to do that wasn't through a business pitch or a fashion portfolio. It was through performance. By day, Chanel worked as a seamstress. By night, she sang in smoky cafes for crowds of drunk soldiers and aristocrats. One of her go-to songs had the lyrics, "Who's seen Coco in the Trocadero?" And from then on, the name stuck. Coco, short, catchy, marketable, and entirely self-invented. She wasn't Gabrielle, the poor orphan, anymore. She was Coco Chanel. And soon, a man in the audience, one with money, horses, and connections, would invite her into a world of power, scandal, and opportunity. But he had no idea that she wasn't just there for romance. She was there to take everything. Chapter 2. Chanel's first power play. Coco Chanel didn't stumble into high society. She infiltrated it. She met Etienne Balsan, a wealthy ex-cavalry officer and full-time playboy, at a club. He was charmed by her boldness. She was drawn to his money. He offered her a new life. Horses, silk sheets, parties filled with aristocrats. Chanel moved into his chateau and became his mistress. To Balsan, she was just another pretty distraction. But Chanel had other ideas. While he gifted her designer gowns and flashy jewelry, she started noticing something strange. The women around her, despite their wealth, were uncomfortable. Corsets suffocated them. Their hats were massive sculptures of feathers and fruit. They dressed like they were performing, not living, and Chanel hated it. So one day, she did the unthinkable. She showed up to a formal event wearing a tailored men's suit borrowed from Balsan. paired with one of her own handmade boater hats. She had no corset, no embroidery, no frills, just clean lines, functional elegance, and the confidence to own the room. People whispered. They stared. But Chanel didn't flinch. She had just declared war on traditional fashion. She didn't want to decorate women. She wanted to free them. Soon, Chanel was experimenting with more designs. She took over a small room in Balsan's chateau and turned it into her first unofficial atelier. While Balsan thought it was a passing hobby, Chanel was sketching blueprints for an empire. But she needed money, real money, not gifts. And none of Balsan's rich friends were interested in investing in a woman's business, at least not until Arthur Boy Capel walked into the picture. Capel was one of Balsan's closest friends. He was English, aristocratic, and dangerously charming. Chanel fell for him instantly, and unlike Balsan, Capel saw more than just a mistress in Chanel. He saw a business partner. Capel believed in her, and he backed her. In 1910, using Capel's investment, Chanel opened her first boutique in Paris. She started with hats, simple, sleek, and completely different from the flamboyant headwear other women wore. The city took notice. French actresses, socialites, and high society women began replacing their old hats with Chanel's. Word spread. Orders exploded. Coco Chanel wasn't just the mistress in the background anymore. She was the designer setting the trend. But for her, success wasn't just about fashion. It was about control. And as her boutique blossomed, her relationship with Capel took a turn, leading to the most painful betrayal of her life. Chapter 3. Love, Betrayal, and Revenge. By 1913, Coco Chanel had opened a boutique in Deauville, a beach town frequented by France's wealthy elite. But to Capel, the store was just another indulgence for his lover. To Chanel, it was the next piece of her empire. She designed casual luxury wear using jersey, then considered fabric for men's underwear. She turned it into breathable, elegant clothing for women who wanted to move, not pose. Her philosophy was simple. If fashion wasn't functional, it wasn't fashionable. And women loved it. By 1914, war broke out across Europe. Chanel's boutiques were hit hard. Orders dried up. Factories closed. It should have been the end. But Chanel adapted. Again. She pivoted to practical designs for working women. Her jersey dresses became uniforms for a new class of women entering factories and offices while the men were off at war. Her designs weren't just popular, they were necessary. But while her business recovered, her heart did not. In 1918, Capel told Chanel he was marrying someone else, the daughter of an English aristocrat. The man who had bankrolled her dreams was leaving her behind. Chanel was devastated. She had always been his mistress, never his equal. She felt used, trapped in the very class system she had worked so hard to impress. And then came the final blow. Just 1 year later, Capel was killed in a car accident. Rumor has it he was on his way to see Chanel when it happened. She never cried in public again. What came next wasn't grief. It was ambition sharpened by rage. In 1921, Chanel launched a new product that would permanently stamp her name into the history books, Chanel No. 5. At the time, perfumes were made with a single note, vanilla, lavender, or rose. Chanel broke the rules. No. 5 blended over 80 scents. It was synthetic, complex, and utterly modern. It was the first perfume made by a woman for women. And the bottle, simple, square, nothing like the ornate flasks of the day. It wasn't just a scent, it was a message. Chanel No. 5 became an icon, a symbol of sophistication. Even Marilyn Monroe said she wore nothing to bed but a few drops of No. Parch. But behind the scenes, Chanel had a problem. She needed a new business partner, someone who could handle manufacturing, contracts, and bank accounts which women weren't even legally allowed to open themselves. So in 1924, she struck a deal with businessman Pierre Wertheimer. He put up the money. He handled the distribution. In exchange, he got 70% of the company. Chanel kept 10%. It was a deal she would regret for the rest of her life, and that regret would later turn into something much darker during one of the most horrifying chapters of the 20th century. Because when war returned to France, Coco Chanel didn't just survive, she adapted again. But this time, her decisions would lead to accusations that she had done the unthinkable. Chapter 4. Coco Chanel, the Nazis' secret weapon. In 1940, Nazi Germany invaded Paris. Most fashion houses shut down. Chanel did too, at least officially. Her boutique closed. Her workers were laid off. But not everything stopped. She moved into the Ritz Hotel, luxurious, safe, and now also the headquarters of the Nazi military. Chanel wasn't just surviving the war. She was living among the occupiers. And then things got even more disturbing. She began a relationship with Hans Gunther von Dinklage, a senior Nazi officer. Whether it was love, strategy, or survival, no one really knows. But Chanel, the icon of French fashion, was now quite literally sleeping with the enemy. And the benefits were clear. While German forces tore apart Paris, Chanel's perfume shop remained untouched. Her brand stayed protected. Her lifestyle mostly uninterrupted. Some said she was doing what she had to do. Others said she wasn't just playing along. She was playing for the other side. French intelligence files later revealed that Chanel had been registered as Agent F7124. She had missions, objectives, and the Nazis wanted to use her elite connections, especially her friendship with Winston Churchill, to gather intel and even negotiate on their behalf. According to declassified records, in 1944, Chanel was sent to Madrid on a covert mission to contact the British. She offered a secret peace deal from the Nazis. Churchill declined. But why was Chanel helping? There's one theory that goes beyond politics or ideology. It was about revenge and business. Remember Pierre Wertheimer, the man who owned 70% of Chanel No. 1? He was Jewish. Under Nazi occupation, Jews were stripped of business ownership. Chanel saw a chance to take back what she believed was hers. She petitioned German authorities to revoke Wertheimer's ownership under anti-Semitic laws and hand the company back to her. But Wertheimer had seen this coming. He had already transferred his stake to a Christian friend and fled France. After the war, he simply reclaimed it. Chanel failed to get the business back, but the damage to her reputation had just begun. By 1945, the war was ending, and French citizens who had collaborated with the Nazis were being rounded up. Chanel was arrested for questioning, but then she was released. No charges, no trial. Why? Some say it was lack of evidence, but German officers had testified that Chanel had worked for them. So why did she walk free? Theories point to Winston Churchill. As Chanel's former friend, it's rumored he intervened to avoid public scandal and protect the British elite from exposure. Others believe Chanel used her wealth to bribe her way out. Whatever the reason, she escaped justice, but not judgment. Her name was now stained across France. She was labeled a traitor, a collaborator, a disgrace. She fled to Switzerland and disappeared from the public eye. For 10 years, Coco Chanel lived in exile, watching the world move on without her. Her empire was crumbling. Her name, once synonymous with elegance, now whispered with suspicion. And yet, the story wasn't over. Because while France rejected her, another country would soon invite her back, and she would rise again. Chapter 5. The Exiled Traitor Who Took Over America's Closet. By the 1950s, Coco Chanel was a ghost, exiled in Switzerland, disgraced in France, and disconnected from the fashion world she once ruled. She was now in her 70s, an age where most people retire, disappear, or fade quietly. But Chanel wasn't built to fade. While hiding out, she kept a close eye on the fashion world. And what she saw infuriated her. Christian Dior's new look was dominating. Cinched waists, long skirts, heavy ornamentation. Chanel called it ridiculous. "He dresses women like armchairs," she sneered. To her, it was everything she had fought against. And she decided it was time to fight again. In 1954, at 71 years old, Coco Chanel reopened her fashion house in Paris. It had been closed for 15 years. She launched a new line, simple suits, straight skirts, and practical silhouettes that echoed the freedom she had once promised women. But France didn't welcome her back. The press attacked her. The critics mocked her designs. The public hadn't forgotten her wartime choices. Her comeback collection was declared a failure. It could have ended right there. But then something unexpected happened. Her designs made it to America, and they exploded. Across the ocean, Americans didn't care about Chanel's past. Or maybe they didn't know. Either way, they loved her look. Her clean lines matched the values of a rising modern woman. Stylish, sharp, independent. Hollywood stars wore Chanel. Jackie Kennedy wore Chanel. And soon, French critics had no choice but to admit Coco Chanel was back. But behind the scenes, there was one strange twist. Her comeback wouldn't have been possible without Pierre Wertheimer, the same man she had once tried to push out using Nazi laws. After the war, Chanel had sued him repeatedly to get a larger cut of the Chanel No. 5 profits. She lost every time. And yet it was Wertheimer who funded her return to fashion. He saw her as the brand's best asset, even if she hated him. Chanel continued working into her late 70s, creating new versions of her now iconic tweed suits, gold-chained handbags, and two-tone shoes. The world had forgiven her, or at least moved on, and the empire grew. But here's the irony: the Chanel brand was now thriving, and she still only owned 10% of it. Her designs had changed women's fashion forever, but the company, that belonged to someone else. Still, for Coco Chanel, the war, the exile, and the comeback had all done something unexpected. They made her immortal. Chapter 6: Legacy, Ownership, and the Moral Dilemma. When Coco Chanel died in 1971 at the age of 87, she was still designing, still working, still creating. She passed away in her suite at the Ritz Hotel, alone, but surrounded by the empire she had built. But the story didn't end with her. The Chanel brand was taken over by fashion legend Karl Lagerfeld, who modernized the house and made it an even bigger global powerhouse. Today, Chanel is one of the most recognizable fashion labels in the world. But here's the catch: it's not owned by anyone from Chanel's family. Instead, the Wertheimer family, descendants of Pierre Wertheimer, her business partner from the 1920s, still control the company. The very man she fought so hard to remove ended up owning the brand she started. His grandsons are now worth over $30 billion. Coco's name is everywhere, but her wealth, her power, her legacy, that's a much more complicated story. She freed women from corsets, shortened hemlines, and changed the way the world defined luxury. She built a brand from nothing. She redefined femininity and style. But she also collaborated with Nazis, lied about her past, and tried to exploit anti-Semitic laws for personal gain. So what do we do with a legacy like that? Can we separate the art from the artist? Can we wear the perfume without smelling the history? There's no easy answer. Chanel's life is a case study in contradiction. Brilliance and betrayal, elegance and exploitation, power and moral ambiguity. She once said, "I don't care what you think of me. I don't think about you at all. But we're still thinking about her, and maybe that's the ultimate mark of her success, not just being remembered, but being impossible to forget. Coco Chanel began her life as a nameless orphan and died as a global icon. She didn't just design fashion, she defined it. But her rise wasn't built on innocence. It was forged through reinvention, manipulation, and unrelenting ambition. She liberated women from outdated norms, yet entangled herself in one of history's darkest regimes. Her story isn't black or white. It's Chanel No. 5. Complex, layered, impossible to categorize. And whether you see her as a genius or a traitor, one thing is undeniable. Coco Chanel didn't just survive history, she tailored it